The Devil You Know. Chapter 3. Cecilia. Thursday, March 20th, 2014. Cecilia stood in line at Brood Awakenings, head in a fog. Trying to wake up, she took a deep breath, inhaling the earthy, sweet smell of fresh coffee in the air. The locals were dressed mostly in business casual. Some wore thin wool scarves, knitted hats, and boots, even though the temperature sat at 50 degrees. Cecilia stood out in the crowd, dressed in a tailored black blazer and 4-inch Louboutin pumps. She wasn't a fan of this little town. Sure, it was beautiful, with the beach 10 minutes away, but it was a little too relaxed. She missed the fast pace and the impersonal, cosmopolitan feel of New York. As soon as she saved enough money, she planned to move back, start over, and put the past behind her. Maybe buy a house just outside the city. The sooner she could get out of Spring Lake, the better. She stifled a yawn. 2 sleepless nights in a row took their toll, but the worst part of it was the reason. Fidgeting with the straps of her leather bag, she saw in her mind's eye the pale, evil face lurking outside her door. She tried to stay patient as the elderly woman ahead of her struggled to place her order. The barista was offering her too many choices: French roast, pale roast, iced coffee. The woman just wanted a damn cup of coffee. Cecilia used this time to piece together a logical solution to her problem. For what felt like the first time in her life, she wasn't sure how to handle a situation. Rick always criticized her for being a control freak. Rick. Just thinking his name gave her a surreal feeling, as if she were floating, drifting through a life that wasn't hers. Lately, she felt as though she were playing a part in a movie, and any minute the director would yell, "Cut!" She awoke some mornings thinking for a split second she was in bed at her old house, expecting to see Rick next to her. Then her eyes would open to see her small pale blue bedroom, the curtains the wrong color, the door on the wrong side of the room, and she would be caught in a flurry of momentary panic until she came back to reality. Then, when she thought how she ended up alone in a small house in downtown Spring Lake, the panic returned. She shook her head to snap out of it and forced herself to focus on the problem at hand. If her monstrous visitor returned tonight, she would call the police. Hopefully, he would stick around long enough to be caught. When her coffee was ready, she took it and turned around, only to bump squarely into the man behind her. She mumbled a sorry and tried to quickly step aside, but when she met his eyes, she couldn't look away. His eyes were brown and penetrating, like large, omnipresent orbs holding the answers to life's mysteries. It was jarring. The sharp fingers of sunlight reached into the window, shining directly onto his face, lightening his eyes a shade, giving them a bronze glow like nothing she had seen before. To say he stood out among everyone else in the shop would be a drastic understatement. He looked like he dropped onto Earth from another planet. His porcelain skin was a sharp contrast to his jet black hair. Cecilia stared unabashedly, taking in his tall, lean frame. She guessed him to be mid-30s, although it was hard to tell. His ruggedly handsome look suggested he might be older, although there wasn't a single wrinkle on his face. His pouty, bow-shaped lips revealed an ancient sadness, like a man who knew too much. But his eyes sparkled with quiet bewilderment, as if he were constantly amused by human behavior. He also looked vaguely familiar, but she could not think of where she had seen him. When she bumped into him, she smelled a sweet and woodsy scent, as if he was just sitting next to a fireplace. She felt instantly attracted to him, and her face flushed slightly when he held out his hand and smiled, his eyes like glowing embers. He somehow managed to appear both wicked and shy at the same time. "No, pardon me. I'm Aiden." She accepted his handshake and mentally scolded herself for her reaction to him. She didn't normally blush like a schoolgirl when faced with an attractive man. She was a grown woman, a respected doctor, for God's sake. His rosy lips quirked up into a barely noticeable smirk as she looked him over. His black, long-sleeved Henley shirt was just tight enough to show off his toned chest and shoulders, and his faded black jeans fit like a glove. His square-toed black cowboy boots were scuffed and worn around the edges. "Cecilia," she said, as she shook his hand and smiled. "Cecilia," he repeated. "What a lovely name." He spoke quietly, and she detected a slight rasp in his voice. His tone and soft words suggested an intimacy that unnerved her, and she suddenly felt shy. "Thank you." One corner of his mouth turned into a half-smile that seemed almost mischievous. She managed a warm smile in return and said, "You don't look like you're from around here, Aiden." Judging from the color of his skin, he hadn't seen the sun in years. His quick smile was that of a naughty boy who was caught stealing, but fully confident he could charm his way out of trouble. Beautiful and observant. Slight pause. You could say I'm fairly new to the area. I see. Well, welcome. He has dimples when he smiles. Jesus help me. I've got to get out of here. Why, thank you. His eyes burned into hers expectantly. Not sure what else to say, Cecilia said. Well, I'd better get to work. It was nice meeting you, Aiden. Disappointment flashed across his face. Likewise, Cecilia. Maybe we'll bump into each other again, he said. Smiling, she nodded quickly and rushed out the door. What was it about him that had her so flustered? No one had ever thrown her off this way before. She barely escaped a fall on her way out the door as she tripped over the rug. Perfect. She felt the rising swell of embarrassment start in her chest, work its way up to her throat as it tightened, then up to her face as it reddened with heat. Grateful her back was to him, she pushed her way quickly through the double doors. Sitting in her car, Cecilia felt faint. She still couldn't recall where she'd seen him before. Those eyes. She never saw that color before, dark golden brown with a hint of shimmering bronze. It's as if I've seen him before, but only in my mind. She froze. Suddenly, remembering her dream from last night, she jerked her head up to see him watching her. He was sitting by the window, sipping his coffee, a book in hand. His expression was amused, but there was something dark just beneath the surface. Regardless of how attractive he was and how polite, she couldn't help but feel darkness, an air of danger surrounding him, warning her to stay far away. She also could not shake the tiny thought in the far recesses of her mind that she had seen him before, but not just in her dreams. She brushed it off, forced herself back to the present, and drove away.